Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, the place to come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker, and welcome to episode 318, Letting Go Without Losing Yourself. Well, as you know, this month, it's been all about boundaries, and we can't talk about healthy boundaries without talking about healthy detachment. And I think it's something that I work with clients around all of the time and what I call magic. And when I talk about detachment, like I've mentioned before, it's not that you don't care. It's not that you are emotionally detached. You can look online for that. That's a whole different thing. When I say detachment, I mean letting go of the outcome. And I think one of the most common reasons people feel emotionally exhausted isn't so much about what they're doing. It's about what they're carrying, like other people's stress, other people's feelings, other people's disappointment, other people's reactions, fill in the blank, other people's whatever. So today we're going to talk about how to care deeply without absorbing what isn't yours and why learning this can change everything. So first, why do we overcarry? Why do we care too much? Some people call it caretaking. Well, I think we learned early on to manage moods, prevent conflict, anticipate reactions, because it really meant safety and belonging, and we're going to talk about that today. Unfortunately, if we don't address it, it's going to lead to enmeshment, burnout, resentment. And really, the most important piece is loss of yourself. Because if you blur who you are with someone else, you don't have the option but to lose yourself insidiously over time. And that is also why it's really hard to feel and express in a healthy way true empathy for other people, true mirroring, because we need to be separate from them before we can do that. And so if you struggle to not have sympathy, but to really have and show empathy, that could be part of the reason why. It's also really difficult to have healthy understanding and compassion and to be emotionally present if we haven't practice loving detachment. Instead, we're practicing what can be called enmeshment or fusion, where we're absorbing what's going on in their life. We're fixing. We're trying to fix their feelings. We're trying to fix their finances. We're trying to fix their behavior. We're feeling overly responsible. And remember, empathy connects us, but fusion will exhaust us. And it's really tough because if you're a loving, caring person, which I'm sure you are, it's hard to know what is that fine line between caring and over-carrying about someone you love. There's a fine line between caring and blurring the boundaries between you and that person, even if they're your child. You may think that, oh, well, I'm worried about them. Oh, it's my job to protect them. Oh, I need to guide them. They're my kids. Or I need to get people to see or convince that person or get them to understand. Because I care, because the stakes are high, Mary. What if something really bad happens? But what we need to understand is it's all about control. It's about trying to control that outcome. And I completely understand why you don't want that outcome or you want a better outcome. So do I. But really looking at loving detachment doesn't mean you don't care. It means you stop controlling. So some of the ways that you can know that you might be over-carrying a little bit, and some of these can be really subtle. But one of them is you feel kind of anxious after interactions with people. Like you're not relaxed and you keep replaying the conversations over and over again in your head. Maybe you've absorbed their moods. Even if you were in a great mood before the interaction and they weren't. And now your day is shot. Another way you know you're caught up in someone else's business is you really struggle to relax even when nothing is technically wrong. Or you feel guilty when you don't fix things, when you don't offer to bail them out or to fix it or to make it better. And finally, you start feeling resentment. Your focus is on that other person, what they're doing, what they're not doing, often to the detriment of your own work in front of you, of your own self-care, and again, of your thoughts and feelings and needs, which is how we lose ourselves. So what does healthy detachment really look like? Well, these are not all the ways, but these are some of the common ways where we can practice healthy detachment. And I say practice because you got to get up and do it every day. The first one is listening without fixing. And we can fix in such subtle and insidious ways. We may not catch ourselves doing that, but a few examples are not trying to fix someone's feelings when they're upset, telling them, oh, it'll be okay, it'll be fine, here, have some tissues. It's actually just letting them have their struggle, have their feelings, and reminding ourselves that it's their job to fix their problems. And if they didn't ask for our advice, we shouldn't give it. And in the same vein, allowing them to sit in discomfort. Well, guess what? We're sitting in our own. Because one of the reasons we have a hard time detaching is it's very uncomfortable to not jump and fix it. To let others have their reaction. So let's say you're in a situation where you're saying no, you're practicing your new boundaries, and they don't like it. To learn how to detach from other people's reactions and let them be about them because they are. And staying grounded in your body. Not being in your limbic system. Being able to deep breathe. To be able to think straight. To be thoughtful. To be present with where you are. And detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It just means you stop disappearing. Now, the biggest piece of detachment and why I think it goes hand in hand with boundaries is emotional ownership. When we have boundaries, we have self-respect. Without boundaries, we cannot, nor can we show others respect, I might add. And so what I mean by ownership is you own your feelings, you own your thoughts, you own your responses, you own your limits, you own your beliefs, you own your choices, you own your denial. And simultaneously, you detach and allow other people to own their feelings and thoughts and choices and behaviors and limits and beliefs. When everyone owns their stuff, I think relationships have a chance of being healthier. Without personal responsibility, I just don't think it's possible. I think you're going to have blurred boundaries. You're going to have a lot of passive-aggressive, possibly abusive behavior. It's not going to be safe. And it's not going to be productive. You can't solve problems. And this is one of the most common patterns that I work with, especially with people who are empathetic and capable and tired, is they're parenting their partners, or they're over-parenting their kids, and they're parenting their friends and their neighbors. And it is exhausting. And also, when we don't detach, what we need to remember is the messaging that we're giving. To our kids, the subtle message is, I don't know if you can handle it. To our partner, the same thing. And to our friends. And so one of the things that I have clients do when they're working on this is to say, okay, I want you to go back to that person and say, I am so sorry. I was so disrespectful at dinner when I got all up in your business and told you what to think, feel, and need. And what you should be doing to fix it. And I'm so sorry. I want them to hear you say that. I want you to hear you say that. I want your subconscious part of your brain to hear you say that. Because up until now, it's been normal and loving and caring and kind and all the things you want to tell yourself to go fix somebody. Well, why do you struggle with that? Like, why can some people lovingly detach and others really struggle? And something I want to name here is this. Not everyone grows up learning how to lovingly detach and allow. And that difference usually isn't about personality as much as it is about environment. So what allows healthy detachment to develop is people who can care without carrying often grew up in environments, aka families, where a few key things were present. One, they were allowed to have their feelings without being responsible for other people's feelings. They had their feelings mirrored back to them when they were little, so they understood them and they were validated. Two, they were allowed to have feelings without being responsible for other people's reactions to their feelings. A big one is the adults in their life handled their own emotions. Caregivers were at least moderately emotionally mature. And then mistakes were met with guidance instead of shame. And boundaries were modeled, not as a rejection, not as control, but as normal parts of relationships. So they learned early that closeness didn't require self-sacrifice. So in these healthier emotional environments, what gets taught is that people grow up able to lovingly detach and allow, and a few things were consistently present, even if the family wasn't perfect. And I really want to flesh some of these out because so many people say, oh, my family was really loving and kind, Mary, but they don't see this stuff until they know what to look for. And the first thing is emotional ownership was very clear. People were responsible for their feelings, like I just mentioned. But what does that look like? Well, let's say a parent is upset about something, but they don't expect the child to fix it, soothe it, or carry it. In other words, the parent's emotions were allowed, named, and handled by the person having them. And depending on that child's age, they probably didn't do that in front of them. They did not dump on the kid. Now, it's one thing for your child to walk in the kitchen and you're wiping tears from your eyes because you just got an awful phone call. I'm not talking about that. I think it's healthy for them to see us have emotions. What we don't want to do is turn around and dump it all on our 8-year-old child, this really awful thing that happened, because it's not their place and they don't have a way to metabolize that. And we don't want to switch roles with them. You're there to help them through their awful stuff. They're not supposed to be meeting your emotional needs in that regard. You should have grown-ups doing that. If you turn around and look at them and say, it's okay, sweetie, I just got some bad news. I'll handle it. I have some friends that are coming over later to sit with me around it. And that teaches something really powerful. It says, I can care about how someone feels without being responsible for it. So your kid can witness your tears and see that as normal, but not have tons of anxiety around what should they have to do about it because you're not taking care of it. Feeling with someone doesn't mean feeling for them, doesn't mean fixing it. In healthier families, a big thing too is that conflict didn't have to be catastrophic. So in these environments, it didn't have to feel like what I call a threat to the relationship. Meaning, yeah, disagreements happened and emotions rose sometimes. And importantly, though, things came back together. No one had to panic, no one had to perform or to placate. And repair and resolution was expected, not fear. So then conflict was looked at something to move through, not something to prevent at all costs. And there are reasons why in unhealthy families, the only recourse is to prevent it because there isn't resolution. In healthier families, autonomy was supported. This is really important. So then children were allowed to have their own preferences, their opinions and limits, without being shamed or guilted, even subtly so. Saying no didn't mean you lost love, and being different didn't mean being rejected. So independence of thought and feelings and needs wasn't treated as disloyalty to the family. It was actually encouraged. And like we've talked about many times here on the show, survival is everything when you're a kid. And being rejected by your family can feel terrifying, even on a biological level. When these experiences are present, therefore, detachment doesn't feel cold or unsafe later in life. It feels really natural. People own their stuff, and we let them own their stuff. So let's contrast that with what unhealthy emotional environments teach instead. In environments where loving detachment feels difficult or even wrong, a very different set of lessons was learned, often quietly and often early. In the first way, emotional ownership was blurred because it wasn't clear. Someone else's mood set the tone for the room. And as a child, you learned how to monitor and anticipate or manage emotional shifts, not because you wanted to, but because it felt necessary, because it was scary. And feelings weren't owned by the person having them. They spilled outward. They got leaked all over everyone. And over time, that teaches, if someone's upset, must be my job to fix it, which includes not having my feelings in the room. Like if dad was a rager, no one else was allowed to be angry, or that wasn't going to go well. And you don't want to identify with that as a kid, so maybe you stuff your feelings, you learn how to be the peacemaker. And so instead of empathy, it became responsibility. And conflict could very well feel dangerous. It felt uncomfortable and risky, and disagreements could very quickly lead to maybe emotional withdrawal where mom and dad don't talk for a week, explosions, whether verbal or physical or both, silence, punishment, and there wasn't reliable repair with validation of, kids, I'm sorry you had to go through that. That was pretty scary, wasn't it? Your mom and I should have done a better job handling our feelings. And so guess what? If you're the kid, your nervous system learned how to avoid, smooth over, or disappear to stay safe. And so peace was probably maintained through your self-suppression, because what else were you going to do? And then in unhealthy families, autonomy was not okay. It was discouraged and or punished. Because guess what? It was seen as defiance or selfishness or disloyalty. It's like you're in a gang and you're not doing what the gang leader wants you to do and what all the other gang members want you to do. That feels like a threat to the group. So saying no probably led to guilt. Having needs either led to criticism or shaming, or they just weren't met. And differentiating, being separate from others, felt like rejection. These families also really struggle to create any sense of healthy belongingness. The only sense you got was through the unspoken rules of don't rock the boat here and maybe we'll let you stay. And so many people learned that closeness required compliance. And so belonging came at the cost of the self. And I know that sounds dramatic, but that's exactly what's happening. And so how does this affect us in adulthood? Well, when you grow up with these lessons, detachment doesn't feel healthy or good or neutral. It feels like abandonment. It feels cruel and uncaring. It feels very unsafe, even when it's healthy. So your system isn't resisting detachment per se. It's just protecting connection the only way it knows how. And that was the unhealthy old way. Now, understanding this is not about blaming your family or blaming the past, but I think it's so important to recognize that what once kept you safe as a kid is probably now costing you so much energy and clarity and peace and well-being on many different levels that it's worth looking at. And I think the good news is that patterns learned in those unsafe environments can be gently unlearned over time in safer ones, which is why I'm such a big fan of group coaching, because sometimes it takes a healthier little family to help you heal. So as you're working on boundaries and you find detachment feels really hard or even wrong to you, it does for everyone at first when they start working on it. It's one of the biggest hurdles we have, I think, in embracing the concept of detachment. So you're not alone. It's normal. It's good. But it also doesn't mean that you're unkind or incapable. It just means your system learned closeness differently, and it can learn again. I help people do this work. I've done it myself. And I love seeing the cool stuff that happens when it's practiced. So today we talked about how many people can feel emotionally drained without fully understanding why, and how caring deeply can slowly turn into exhaustion. especially for those folks who learned early on to manage other people's emotions, keep the peace, stay vigilant, focus on outcomes. And we talked about why some people seem able to detach with ease. There's people in your life and say, oh, that's their problem. Let them deal with it. And some of you feel really anxious and guilty and shut down at the idea of letting go. So we looked at the difference between empathy and over-carrying and how our early emotional environments were everything because they shaped the way we relate to responsibility, to closeness, to self-trust. And how learning to allow others to have their feelings and their choices ironically creates more safety in the relationship, more clarity for everybody, and I think genuine connection. If you're struggling to do this work on detachment, reach out, check out the courses in the show notes, especially my Find Your Voice course, because that talks all about needs and boundaries and detachment, and there's group and one-on-one coaching in there for support. All right, so take good care of you this week. Try to pay it forward. Keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you can begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.